Erin O'Toole is joining me. He is the Conservatives' Foreign Affairs Critic, and he is standing by here at our studios at CTV. Erin, always good to have you on. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a very disappointing day and something we've feared for some time. You know, the Liberals in the last month or so have tried to put positive spin on the fact that they weren't at the table, but that didn't impact our interests. That was always a ridiculous situation. You always want to be at the table for any deal, let alone the most important economic deal for our economy. And today, there are so many questions on whether Canada will be a full partner in this. How will the auto parts content rules apply to us? There's so many questions. It shows the Trudeau government really blew it over the last year. And it's frustrating. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, though, that the degree of integration of our economy and that the connections we have on a corporate and person-to-person level will help us leverage a good deal in the end. But it's disconcerting, to say the least.
We were talking about this being a very simple strategy for Donald Trump, and one that often works when you're dealing with rivals, which is divide and conquer. Has Canada been outmaneuvered?
Yes, we have. And in fact, you may recall that Prime Minister Trudeau made a high-profile trip to Mexico and a number of specific entreaties to the Mexicans to work together. We always said at the beginning, the Conservatives said this clearly, that on some issues there's going to be mutual area of interest with Mexico, but that Canada should pursue its national interest. The Mexicans took that approach. The Trudeau Liberals did not, and even Mexico wasn't insistent on Canada being at the table in the last month and a half. So they're ratifying a deal while Minister Freeland is in Europe. Now we're just hoping and praying that we are going to be able to be swept along on positive terms in this deal. But for over a year, we've been saying the Trudeau government has been playing way too much domestic politics on this, the progressive agenda, trying to contrast themselves with the U.S. administration, and all that is coming home to roost today.
You know, the American economy, as you are very aware of, is 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And we get into issues of sort of pride and patriotism up here in this country about, you know, being seen to bow before the Americans. But I mean, how do we get away from a situation, Erin, in which we are at the mercy, at the end of the day, of Donald Trump?
Well, I've been saying for over a year, Todd, that Canada needs to show areas where both our national interests are involved. So we said a year ago that the auto industry should be the centerpiece to negotiations from Canada's standpoint, because really free trade on the continent goes back to 1965 and the Auto Pact. And successive Canadian governments, both Conservative and Liberal, have always used the auto industry as the linchpin to wider trade in the U.S. We also said that a higher degree of defense integration. So last fall, the Conservatives came out with the support for the ballistic missile defense program to modernize NORAD, to remind the Trump presidency that Canada is the closest trade and security partner that they have. So we've been pushing for these things to allow the U.S. to see Canada as a key ally to their security and economic success. I still think we can do that. But when you see the Trudeau government not even mentioning the auto industry in their list of priorities last summer, they played politics, talking about the progressive agenda, Indigenous issues, the environment, and so forth. When the U.S. wanted to talk Turkey on trade, we really got outplayed, and the fact we haven't been at the table showed that even Mexico didn't think Canada was taking the talk seriously.
It keeps coming back to three key issues, it would seem anyway, Erin, for the president, which is the auto sector that he wants Canada to make concessions on, the dairy sector, he wants us to open up our market, and the lumber sector as well. At the end of the day, with this news today between the United States and Mexico, were we thrown under the bus by the Mexicans?
No, we weren't at all. This is what the Trudeau government doesn't realize, is that countries should go into negotiations in a friendly way. These are our friends, our closest trading partners, but you go in for your national interest. That's how any serious country negotiates. You don't try and use the negotiations as domestic political fodder like Justin Trudeau does. Not just with NAFTA, the India trip that we all remember so well, that was him domestic politicking in a foreign country and it hurting the relations. So they need to get serious, start talking about jobs in the economy, our economic ties with the U.S. to make sure that we're part of these arrangements. I think hopefully the Trudeau government learns from this, but today we're all worried on whether we're just going to be left with a take it or leave it agreement.
What about that timeline, just before we go? Because we heard from Robert Lighthizer, the American trade representative, saying he wants a deal, Erin, by Friday.
This is the scenario that I feared, Todd, was Canada was going to be shut out, which we were about a month or two ago, and that we would be left to basically accept it. Our economy is so tied to U.S. trade that we can't possibly just walk away. So not being at the table, not taking talks seriously last fall, when we should have been really pushing for a quick deal then, shows that the strategy the Liberals took was the poor one. We tried not to politicize it. We even agreed to go down to Washington and work with them on it. They never wanted to do that. And this is a time where the Liberals own this. I'm hopeful that we can salvage something, because this is so critical to the economy. I'm not taking any joy in saying they've screwed this up, because there's a lot of jobs in my riding in Durham here in Ontario, the auto industry affected. So let's hope we can get a good deal in the end.
Erin O'Toole is the Conservatives' foreign affairs critic, joining us from our studios in Toronto. Wonderful to have you on as always, Erin. Thank you for your insights on this.
Good to be back.